So I would like to take just a moment here to introduce Shilpa Jain, the Executive Director of YES, an organization which connects, inspires, and collaborates with change makers to build thriving, just, and regenerative ways of life for all. So prior to taking that role, Shilpa spent 2 years as an education and outreach coordinator of Other Worlds and 10 years as a learning activist with the People's Institute for Rethinking Education and Development, which is based in India. Shilpa has researched and written numerous books and articles and facilitated workshops and gatherings on topics including globalization, creative expressions, ecology, democratic living, innovative learning, and unlearning. She is passionate about dance and music, organic and natural farming, upcycling and zero waste living, asking appreciative questions, and being in community, which sounds to me an awful lot like a co-housing type of person. So we're delighted to have her with us here today. Shilpa, welcome.
Thanks so much, Karen. And Karen, thank you so much for the invitation to be here. Hello, everybody. Really nice to be with you all today, and I'm looking forward to conversation and exploration with you. The title of my talk is around building bridges and healing conflicts, and so I will be getting into that. And I noticed that the theme of the conference today is around connections, so I thought we could just start by taking a moment to honor our connections. So if you'd like to close your eyes or soften your gaze or look away from the screen, take a little moment off screen. I'm just gonna invite us into a little bit of deeper connection. I know it helps me also arrive a bit more. So as your eyes are closed or you've looked away, look down, just inviting you to connect in with your breath and your own body, our first point of connection, and just really slowing down, taking a moment to slow down, to enter this incredible day with these beautiful people and all the learning, unlearning, and uplearning you're hoping for today. So maybe we could just take a few breaths into our bodies, connecting with your own breath, your own inhale. Every inhale, a chance to say yes to life. And every exhale, a surrender to the present moment. And building upon these connections to our breath and body, inviting you to connect to Mother Earth. All of the places that Mother Earth both lives in you and that you live in her. Feeling your feet on the ground, feeling the support of the earth with you, feeling the ways that all the elements of the earth are inside of you. We are 70% water, much like the earth. Our bones carry all the minerals of the earth. We breathe, we bring air into our bodies from the earth. It keeps us alive, it sustains us. And we are literally on fire, 98.6 degrees. So just inviting you to feel all of those elements inside of you. And then a bit of a connection to the place that you are, the land that you're on right now, honoring that land, that particular ecology, those trees, those beings, and honoring the indigenous peoples of the land of where you're calling from, those who have stewarded the land for a very, very long time and continue to steward the land, and honoring their experiences of displacement and forced relocation, and honoring those who are still there and who are continuing to steward the land, and honoring ourselves to be in right relationship with the land and with those peoples. Taking a breath there, taking a moment to really feel those connections to the land and to the peoples of that land. And continuing For me, that land is here in Bay Area, California, the Ohlone people. When we have a moment and folks feel like if they can enter into the chat, some of the places you're coming from and the peoples of that land that you're honoring there. And then just taking a moment to begin to feel into the web of relationships that each of us is bringing with us. Our families, our biological families and our chosen families, our friends, our colleagues, our co-housers, our neighbors, and all the different companions we have in our life and work journey. And just really taking a moment to feel those connections and how they lift us up and sustain us, sometimes challenge us, help us grow, help us learn, help us be our purpose here in the world. And then just expanding our web of connection a little bit further out into the web of our wider world and all the different peoples here and the different communities we're connected with, the places we're connected with locally and around the world. Taking a moment to feel those webs of connections that are there with us. And more breath. Our breath is part of our connections. The atoms that we exchange through our breath have been breathed by every being that ever existed in this world. And so we can feel that always through our breath. And a moment to feel into that wider web, the widest web of all life and all being. And then the wider web of the cosmos and our ancestors and any spiritual forces that you connect to and that you bring around you, the guides that are with you and with us here today. And another breath for all of these connections, all of the strength and the energy these connections bring us, all of the opportunities for growth and learning and healing, everything that makes us who we are. In Hindi, Satish Kumar, who wrote a beautiful book and who was also a community builder and co-houser, wrote a big book called You Are, Therefore I Am. And when I think about these webs of connection, I feel that. You are, therefore I am. In so many ways, this time is about a shift from separation to connection, a shift from isolation to interdependence, a shift from being the lone wolf to our collective wisdom. And I see every moment as a chance to build a bridge or build a wall. And we have opportunities to sort of acknowledge that our connections are what help us to make that choice, where we want to go moment to moment and towards that vision of wholeness. So seeing these connections can remind us that we're not alone, that we both give to and we receive from this wider web, and it helps us co-create our lives and the communities that we want to see. So I invite you to open your eyes if you haven't, and take your time to come forward and to feel your connections. Seeing here in the chat a lot of beautiful acknowledgements of the land and the people that we're in with and stewarding with and on. And so thank you for all of that. I was going to just offer us, I have a few little slides here to support us. And so I'm just going to offer us a moment as we are beginning our conversation today for a little bit of visualization of Soham. You are, therefore I am. And just feeling those webs of connection to all of life and to all of the cosmos with us. Thank you, everyone. Hope you're feeling a little more connected to yourself and to each other and to the places you're coming from and your wider webs. I'm going to talk a little bit about building bridges first. I've been a bridge builder my whole life. In many ways, I was born into it. A bit of my story, I'm the daughter of immigrants from India. My parents both came to the US from Rajasthan, which is the western part of India, in the early 70s. And I really think about my parents as my first teachers of community building, because it felt super important to them that my brother and I have a really deep connection to our culture and to our language and to our wider web of community. And so they found people all over the Chicago area where they settled who were also from Rajasthan. And every weekend we would gather at someone's home, sometimes our home, sometimes other homes, about 15 to 20 families. And they became our extended family. And you may know this already, but in India, we don't have a word for, we don't say Mr. or Mrs., we say auntie and uncle. We call everyone auntie and uncle. Like the most generic term you can call someone is an auntie and uncle. So I had all these aunties and uncles who were my parents' friends and all these friends to grow up with. And the ritual of gathering every weekend to share food, to share time, to share stories and experiences, to support each other, that was such something that I was completely steeped in. And so I always give homage to my parents for teaching me community building before I even knew what it meant. I also had this beautiful gift of being raised Jain, which is one of the faiths in India. And from a very young age, one of the core principles of Jainism is around nonviolence. And so really honoring the smallest of the creatures. So which really put into me this love of the biggest of the creatures, you know, the humans, the human world and the non-human world, and how important it was to be able to recognize that there were multiple paths that people were walking, and to walk in the world as much as I could with love and compassion. And so that was part and parcel of my upbringing, as well as going to India as a young child and being able to sort of see people living all different kinds of way and really acknowledging the dignity and respect for each and every person and all these different life paths that people were walking. And then I had this beautiful gift of being born and raised in a community in the suburbs of Chicago that was largely first-generation immigrants from Thailand and Taiwan and Pakistan and India and the Philippines and Korea and Haiti and Syria and all over the world. And to walk into neighbors' houses who are also my playmates and friends, where there would be Buddhist monks visiting, or there would be a gathering happening to celebrate a cotillion for my Filipino friends, or to go and experience the different ways that people were celebrating Ramadan, or all these different experiences that I got to have as a young person. And so for me, it really normalized something that difference was just part of life, and that actually there was so much joy and so much curiosity that I could bring to that. And so without even really knowing it, I was practicing something called appreciative inquiry. And I want to share that slide with you all too, which is really a methodology that has been extremely transformative for me in my work. And it comes out of a long tradition about asking questions that will really transform our world and our life. And so the founders, or the people who wrote a book about it, David Cooper Ryder and Diana Whitney, they say in the book Appreciative Inquiry, that human systems grow towards what they persistently ask questions about. And so by transforming what we ask, you grow what you ask. If we ask questions that have substance, that evoke a story, questions that really come from our genuine curiosity, that we don't know the answer to, questions that really come from our integrity, in the sense that we would always be willing to answer those questions ourselves and dive into them, and that they bring forth a positive energy, which could be generosity, strength, care, vulnerability, power, possibility, imagination, creativity. Those kinds of questions really can start to transform our world. And so I was steeped in that without even knowing this tool, without even having a sense of it, from a pretty young age, to be curious about the world that I was living in, and to be connected and find those connections. And I think that's like at the heart of bridge building. To be able to build bridges is to like tap into my curiosity and to tap into the delight of like finding these connections that are already there. They're already all around us. And so I also found this as a really deep contrast when I learned it more as to my education and the schooling that I had, which was a lot about critical analysis, which isn't a bad thing, but what it had me do was just break things down all the time. What's not working? What's not working? And by always focusing on what's not working, I would feel very depleted and feel very kind of like, you know, what we have doesn't lead us anywhere. So by transforming my questions that let me look towards what is working, how do we amplify that? Who can I look to? What is sourcing me? Where are there mentors and inspirations that I can draw from? Transforming my questions really transformed my possibilities in my world and gave me an outlet for my curiosity and delight. And so I just invite you as you go throughout the day to practice some appreciative questions, to notice what those can feel like for you as you drop in with this community. And part of what it also offered me in that bridge building context was to really work with diversity. And I know this has become sort of both a buzzword and not a buzzword. It's like something that's always existed, and yet it's, you know, been amplified in the last year with the racial justice uprisings that we had last year from the George Floyd murder, and so much that we're in this world. And it's so fascinating to me to be in this time, because I never thought in my life that I would see this conversation in the US in the way that it is. And so it feels very heartening and very exciting. And I think there's an opportunity there to look at what is it to work with differences, whether those are racial or ethnic, socioeconomic class differences, religion, age, all of these different differences that show up in our world, so many different aspects of our identity. And can we bring this appreciative lens to it? Can we bring this inquiry of like, what can I learn here? What can I share here? Who am I? What am I to offer here? And really see this opportunity as not something we have to fix or solve. It's not about like the conformity that maybe you learned as much as I learned in education, the uniformity and the conformity, but maybe there's something here about our wider web and our wholeness. And so there's an opportunity for both the unlearning and for the uplearning towards practicing into that kind of bridge building. I'll take a breath there, and just inviting you to take a breath as we talk and explore. And a bridge building and connection across differences and building into a wider web also leads to conflict. And offer another little slide here around conflict as I've come to understand it, and the distinction between conflicts as a problem or conflicts as an opportunity, conflicts as something that give us an opportunity to move from breakdowns to breakthroughs. And I love this quote from Malidoma and Somé, who are West African elders who work here in the US. And they say that conflict is the spirit of the relationship asking itself to deepen. And so tapping into that, tapping into what's possible when I meet that conflict in a place of deepening, in the potential to deepen, that there's something there, rather than a problem to be solved or something to be fixed or something to be avoided or not talked about. What if I met it with the spirit of the relationship asking itself to deepen? And a core tool that's been really important for me in this process of making that shift, well, two core tools. One has been around understanding that conflict operates in all these different fields, and these are all different possibilities also for transformation. So internally or personally, what's going on with me? How am I feeling? What are my gifts? What are my experiences? What am I coming to this conversation with in my own identities, my own experience of being here in this world, in this time? What's going on internally in my inner field? That's the personal level. And then there's the interpersonal, like who are we? What's going on between us? How are we communicating? Are we listening? Are we sharing from our hearts? Are we speaking our truths? Are we asking for what we need from one another? Are we offering support to one another? What's happening interpersonally? How are we building across these divides? Race, class, gender, sexuality, nationality, religion, age. There's so many places where we have these differences, and there's so many opportunities to kind of build together through that. And then systemically, what's our world? What does it look like? What's our ecology? What are our political systems, economic systems, education systems? How are they affecting us? How are we affecting them? What are we building together? And I think particularly in the spirit of co-housing, you know, you're operating on all of these levels simultaneously all the time. They're all there. And it's helpful to notice them, I think, noticing, okay, where am I in this moment when I'm arriving into this systemic conversation about how we want to operate as a community, and what are our relationships like, and how are they holding us in that operation? And so it helps me to first understand that when conflict erupts, it can erupt on any of these levels. It can erupt interpersonally between folks. It can erupt personally inside of myself. It can erupt systemically in our world. And we certainly are living through that right now. We're in a massive conflict of being in this pandemic for over a year now, and the impact that that has on us personally and interpersonally and in our systems. And so we're there. We're living it all the time. And so giving this light and air really helped me start to see things more deeply, like, oh, there are possibilities. There are possibilities because when I shift something internally, I can also begin to shift it interpersonally. I can also begin to shift it systemically, or any of these elements, any of these fields. Once they start to transform, they can affect the others, and how effective we can be when we're all, you know, cognizant of all of them. We bring awareness to all of them. And so I want to offer that as one of the ways I started to look at conflict differently. Another element of that, well, let me tell a story first before I go into that. One of the things I do is I work on jams, and the work is gathering together, now virtually, usually it was in person, but gathering together change makers who really believe that, you know, looking at this personal, interpersonal, and systemic was important, and who wanted to come together to do that work in community. And it's called a jam in the spirit of a musician's jam, the idea that, oh, wonderful, yay, I see that someone's been to a jam, that it's a co-creative space. And so the idea that when musicians come together, they bring their unique sound and they bring their unique instrument, and then they listen to one another, because when they put things together through that listening, something unique is created, something that never could have existed before. And the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. You know, it has this possibility. And so in the jams that I work on, we jam around our hopes, we jam around our fears, we jam around our struggles and our grief, we jam around our joy, our gifts, we jam around our brokenness, and we jam around our wholeness, towards wholeness. And by listening and sharing with each other in a variety of ways, we start to explore what that wholeness means, the wholeness of our internal, our personal humanity, the wholeness of our collective humanity, the wholeness of our relationship into the wider web of life and earth. And I heard recently someone share that jams are where people first, well, at least this person really saw what healthy love could look like. Another person shared with me that it's where they felt like they saw both individuals and community both being uplifted in life-affirming ways, that it wasn't just about the individual, it wasn't just about the community, that there was a both and there. And the both and is certainly part of the spirit of jamming. One of the things I learned in my first jam was around conflict, and what conflict really could be in a community. And so I went to my first jam in 2002, and it was such a powerful experience, 20 people from 30 countries. At that time, I was living and working in India, and the jam was held in Northern California, and we brought together all these amazing people. And I was a participant there. So it was my first time experiencing this. It was the first time I'd ever seen people sit in a circle and unmask and be real. And these were leaders of all kinds of movements in social justice and environmental issues and education and media and all kinds of things. And they were unmasking. And the power of that truth sharing, that truth telling, that vulnerability was incredible. So we were going along in the jam. It was maybe the third or fourth day, and we were having these gender fishbowls and circles that day. And there was, this was before we had a lot of time structure. Now we have a little bit more, but at that time we were going late into the night, and it was around midnight. And there was a women's circle happening, and the men were bearing witness. And there was a time where there was a conflict that kind of exploded in the middle of that circle around midnight. And one of the participants in that conflict, who was really triggered by something someone else had said, started accusing her and just said, "You've ruined it. You've ruined all of this hard work we've done, all of this beautiful connection we've had, everything that we've put together, all of this love that we've shared. You've ruined it by what you've done and what you've said." And I remember in that moment, one of the facilitators stepped in, Kumba Toure, a shout out to my sister in Senegal and Mali. And she said, or maybe we've built all of this connection and community so we could have this conflict, so we could learn how to be with this conflict in a different way, so we could feel this conflict being this opportunity to deepen further. And that fundamentally altered something for me. I never heard someone describe conflict in that way, that we could actually come together through that. And I'd been a mediator and a truth sharer and a peacemaker for a really long time in my life up until that point. I mean, I wasn't very old, I was 24, but it felt like a long time, at that point in my life. And I never heard people think about, that there are conditions we can create in a community that will support us to be more effective and actually to meet conflict as opportunity, that the container we build can actually transform us. And so I started looking at the container that we had built in the jam. And I do this work ongoingly for the last 20 years of what's the container? What does the container look like? And I just invite this exploration as well as you're going forward. What is the container in grounding ourselves? What's the container in welcoming the fullness of who we are? What is the container in making those introductions, like playfully inviting who we are and seeing who we are? Sharing agreements together and making sure we actually agree to those agreements and setting our intentions personally and collectively, that kind of container. And then how that container deepens with more vulnerability, more honesty, more play, more space for each person's grief and pain and for their joy and for their possibility, and not freezing them at any moment, like knowing we each are evolving beings. This is the kind of container that I've learned can really work with conflict when it comes. And the truth is that conflict is always coming. I have had to learn that over time, that it's not actually a problem. It's always coming. It's just the meeting point of differences. And I want that world where there are differences, where we get to meet in our differences, because I know that each one of us is a unique part of this beautiful mosaic of life. Well, then I know that conflict is coming. It's inevitable. And can I again return to what does it take to meet it differently? And so the last thing I want to kind of share in this context is one more tool that's really been helpful for me in learning how to meet conflict differently. And that has been what I call the zones of awareness and learning. And here it is coming up on the screen. And the zones of awareness of learning maybe are very familiar to many of you, and maybe not, but I think that there's something here about them that is really, really helpful when I pair it with that fields of transformation and that understanding around conflict and bridge building. And it's to look at where I am at any given moment. And so my zones, and each one of us has these. I have a comfort zone, like this nice chill cat koala. It's where things are familiar for me. I know everything. Those are my proclivities, my habits. It's super familiar. It's my known space. So I can relax there. And it's a great space to be. No shade to the comfort zone. It really helps us at different times in our life. The only thing about it is I can't grow or learn there. So I have to step out into my stretch zone, which by definition is uncomfortable. And I can stick my neck out a little, or I can stick my neck out a lot like this giraffe. But what defines my stretch zone is I'm present there. I'm able to listen. I'm able to speak from my heart, speak from my I, speak from my truth, and be present to what's going on around me and really listen to others. And the cool thing is that when I hang out in my stretch zone, then my comfort zone grows. Something that was once unfamiliar becomes familiar. And so there's this beautiful relationship there. And then there's my panic zone. And that's, for me, the like this chicken, it could look like that, as frantic as that. It could also look really quiet. It could look shut down. It could look disconnected. And it's just the moment I stop listening. I stop listening to myself. I stop listening to others. I stop being able to express myself from my heart, from my truth. And I go into maybe fight or flight, which could look mild or extreme. There's all kinds of versions of that. But what defines that panic zone, it also has a purpose. Maybe I've gone into a place of self-protection or gone into a place of like, this is how I need to cope right now. And so to recognize that and honor the panic zone, it's not a bad thing. And to recognize I can't grow or learn there because I'm no longer listening. I'm no longer present. I'm in the past, reliving a story, or I'm in the future with anxiety. I'm not here. So if I want to be here, I got to come into my stretch zone to meet the moment and to be able to grow together. And I want to share one more story about that because these zones have been so powerful to me in my work and in trying to co-create containers of conflict that support our conflict. And this happened when I was in a jam in Pakistan a couple years ago. And again, we were building, growing together, a lot of love being shared, a lot of openness. And so important to notice that the love and the grounding and the sharing often precedes the conflict. One of my mentors, he says that, there are 3 levels of community. The first level is sort of the me, mine, get what's mine, survival of the fittest. The second level is kind of the you scratch my back, I scratch yours, a little bit of like sort of liberalism, tit for tat, that kind of vibe. He's like, but the third level of community, we can only get there when we pass through the so-called negative emotions of grief or anger. We have to go through that together. And when we go through that together, we're able to get into this third level of community, which lets us actually, when conflict comes, we don't drop down into the first level. Like the second level, if there's none of that work done, then the moment a conflict comes, it drops down into me, mine, panic zone. But at the third level, if we've done that work together, then when the next conflict comes, because it's always coming, we don't drop into that first level. We kind of can stay and continue to work through it together. And so that was happening. This love and this connection had built and been built in Pakistan. And then we saw that there was a conflict that erupted between a man and a woman that had a question or an accusation of sexual violence. And in many cases, in those situations, what happens is the man is taken and beaten up and the woman is protected and there's a big uproar. And of course, we were not going to do that in the jam. We're in the jam and we're here to support each other. And so what we did is we slowed down. And the art of slowing down in a community and sitting together and supporting each other and listening and mirroring and reflecting back what we're hearing each other say and making space for the possibilities of misunderstandings and missed understandings and slowing down. And the community had been practicing some of that in contexts outside of the space, but then to practice it in real time. And I'd seen something what was so beautiful. Often people talk about mirroring as an activity of reflecting what I'm hearing someone say. And in Pakistan, they started saying, can I be your mirror? Can I transform myself into being your mirror in this moment so you know that I'm seeing you? And in seeing you, how it slows everything down and allowed that conflict to start to transform. And at the end, there was a space for forgiveness of each other, asking forgiveness of ourselves, and compassion that there's, a misunderstanding that happened in that context. And it was so beautiful. I'm moved even just thinking about it, but I want to just invite those lessons in that it's possible when we slow down and start to mirror and start to listen to one another that we can transform. I'm coming here to the end of my time, and I'm so grateful to be with you all. In closing, I just want to say something about culture and how we build culture. And my friend Ronnie Kreutzmann, who works on something called the People Piece, says that cultures are made up of mindsets, skill sets, and structures. And so noticing where I am in that mindset, skill set, and structure can really transform the culture that I'm trying to make. If I want a culture of expertise, well, we all grew up in that a little bit through our schooling, teacher in the front, sitting in rows, everybody learning to be quiet, that we know. But what about a culture of collective wisdom? If we want a culture of collective wisdom and cooperation, the of the co-housing, the connection, then I got to learn of a different mindset. I got to shift my mindset to abundance. I got to shift my mindset to that there's so much wisdom around me. I got to practice different skill sets of slowing down, of listening deeper. I've got to create new structures of kinds of circles, of different forms of decision-making, of contributions together, and they work together. And so I just want to leave with that thought and invite you forward into the rest of your time together. I hope that it's a beautiful and joyful time and that you can really make forward, leaning into the stretch zone today, practicing your appreciative inquiry and noticing the culture that you're co-creating even today. I truly believe we can make the world we want to see in every moment of our life. Thank you for being with me. Namaste.
Thank you, Shilpa. That's really beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. So many rich thoughts there. Just thinking about conflict always coming and the kinds of connections that let that be transformational for us and building those. So many amazing themes. So thank you very much for being with us today.